One of the most common questions that a lot of folks have about Old Town's Minn-Kota 106 and AutoPilot kayaks is, what is the range on those? How far can you go on a single charge? It's a legitimate question and a very difficult one to answer because everybody's use of a kayak is different. But today I'm going to test how much draw these motors have on your battery, and we're going to look at how that impacts the battery's health and how much draw is being taken on the battery based on its usage, and then we're going to use that to extrapolate what the potential range of these kayaks are under different uses. If you're not interested in the Minn-Kota, the MK106, you can go to the description below and jump ahead to the chapter on the AutoPilot, and that's going to be featuring the AutoPilot 120, which should be fairly close approximation for the 136 as well. I'm powering this with a 100 amp hour battery, and as you can see, I'm just lifting this really easy, so obviously this is not sealed lead acid. This is a 100 amp hour lithium battery from Rebel Batteries, and it's got a cool feature. Let me pop open the box here. Okay, so there it is, Rebel Batteries. And see this little switch here? I can turn that on. Now I have Bluetooth, which connects to my phone, is going to give me live readouts of how much amp hours I have remaining, what my draw is on the battery, so I can see how my motor usage is affecting the performance of the battery in terms of how much draw I have left, or amperage. So I'm going to be using an app on my phone that lets me connect to that, and we'll get started. So it's hard to see here, but here's the app. It gives me real-time remaining amps there on the left, which is 91 amps. I've been trolling for a few hours this morning. And then on the right is the main one here, and then green, that is the actual amperage draw. So I'm going at about 1 mile, 1.5 miles per hour right now, and I'm drawing 3 amps. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do this incrementally at different speeds and see how the amp draw changes across different speeds, working from 1 mile per hour up to maximum speed. All right, let's get started. Okay, at 1 mile per hour, I'm drawing 2 amps. At 2 miles per hour, we are drawing just under 5 amps, so 4.8 amps. Maybe we'll do half increments from here on out. So at 2.5 miles per hour, I'm drawing 6.5 amps. Yeah, well, we're jumping. This is where, when you want those faster speeds, you really chew the battery. We are at 3 miles per hour, 10 amps. All right, let's go up to 3.5. I don't even know what the top speed is of this thing is. It's my first day in it. 3.5 miles per hour, we're drawing 17.5 amps. At 4 miles per hour, I'm drawing 29.7, so 30 amps. It's top speed. That's a throttle all the way to the bottom, which is 4.2 miles per hour, 4.3 miles per hour. I'm drawing 40 amps. So 2 hours of this, and your battery is going to be essentially depleted. All right, so we'll use those numbers to inform the range, and this is where your battery type, lithium versus sealed lead acid, and your behavior as an angler and your use of your motor is going to dictate your effective range, and we're going to do a little bit of math. So let's go do that now. Okay, so for the 106 MK, what I've done here is I've plotted the speed in miles per hour on the x-axis and the draw and amps on the y-axis, so that's your draw amps per hour. And what you can see, there's a pretty incremental change, but the main thing that I really want you to take note of is that when you start getting in excess of 3 miles per hour, the efficiency of this motor drops dramatically, right? So in order to gain just a little bit more speed, the amount of amps that you're drawing off the battery increases dramatically. It's going to reduce your effective range once you start getting above 3 miles per hour. Okay, so it's worth discussing the relationship between volts and depth of discharge between sealed lead acid and lithium iron phosphate batteries like the one featured in this video. So as you can tell, lithium batteries are able to maintain 12 volts, which is what is needed to power these motors efficiently, much deeper into its depth of discharge than, say, a sealed lead acid battery. You're going to be very fortunate to get down to a 60% depth of discharge on a sealed lead acid and still maintain 12 volts, whereas lithium iron phosphate is going to carry you out to close to 95%. Of course, once it hits that point, it declines precipitously. It's also very hard on sealed lead acid batteries to discharge them, beyond 60% of their depth, whereas lithium batteries can actually do that much better. So for the sake of this video, we're going to be talking about range in terms of a battery's capacity to maintain voltage to 12 volts. And this is obviously under ideal conditions with a relatively new battery. So what I've done in this graph is I've looked at what would be your potential range under ideal conditions, no wind, no current, no waves, like I tested these under, if you were just to maintain one speed. And the goal here is just to see what is your potential range under different types of usage. And what I want you to take away from this is that at those top speeds, whether or not you're running lithium or sealed lead acid battery, your range is just not that great above 3.5 miles per hour. If you're at top speed, it doesn't matter what battery you have, you're not going to get much more than 10 miles out of the battery before it's depleted. Even at 3.5 miles per hour with lithium, you're going to get maybe 20 and barely 10 out of the sealed lead acid. But the main takeaway is in that between 2 and 3 miles per hour, which is where a lot of us are going to operate when we're fishing and moving around. Your range is actually really good with lithium batteries, like upwards of anywhere from 30 to 40 miles potentially on a single charge, whereas with sealed lead acid, it's really quite a bit different. It's quite a bit lower, and this is where you can tell having that sealed lead acid really gives you less performance on a single charge, and so your range is going to be limited to 18 to maybe 25 miles. And this is under ideal conditions. So big takeaway there is be conservative on your battery usage, and you're going to be able to spend multiple days out on the water on a single charge, whereas if you're an aggressive user of your motor, pushing it up to top speeds, you're probably going to need to be recharging fairly regularly. To help illustrate this, let's run through a little scenario where you have a 4-mile run to your fishing spot, no current, light winds. You're going to troll around at that spot for 8 miles, maybe working your way back towards the ramp at 2 miles per hour, and then you have a final 1-mile run back to the ramp. Now let's just say that you use your motor conservatively on the run part of this, that is running to the fishing spot and back to the ramp, and just go only at a max of 3 miles per hour. On that first initial run, you're going to burn roughly 13.3 amps, and then trolling, you're going to do 28.8 amps to do that 8 miles at 2 miles per hour. And then that 1 mile run back at 3 miles per hour is going to be 3.3 amps. So your total amperage is going to be about 45.5 amps taken off the battery for the day. That's under ideal conditions. That's fine. Whether or not you have a lithium battery or sealed lead acid battery, you're going to be in really good shape. Let's say you want to do those runs at your top speed. Things change dramatically. So now you're going to burn 38 amps running at top speed to your fishing spot at that 4-mile run. Again, trolling at 2 miles per hour, you're just going to burn the same 28.8, and that 1 mile run back, you're going to burn 9.5 amps. Your total amperage now removed from the battery is 76 amps roughly, which means if you have a sealed lead acid battery, it's depleted. You're going to run out of juice and be paddling back to the ramp. With the lithium battery, you're probably going to be all right, but you're definitely starting to probably see your voltage drop and getting a little bit worried. If it's an older battery that you've cycled, you definitely might be looking at issues. So this just illustrates how much of a difference conservative use of your motor will impact its longevity on a single charge. Let me just take a quick minute to say that these Rebel batteries with their Bluetooth monitoring capabilities have really changed the game for me as an angler who uses motorized kayaks. It lets me monitor in real time how many remaining amps I have left on my battery, what my behavior is doing to the battery. It really is very comforting to be able to just look down on my phone and know exactly how my battery is doing. And, if I'm needing to be a little more conservative on my motor usage, then I can do so and be very well informed. I can also see my battery charge, so I know how close I am to being fully charged and on my way to get back out on the water. I can remotely lock my battery. Let's say if I leave my kayak with the motor in place and battery in place on a road trip, I can lock that battery. It's going to be useless to anybody unless they have access to unlock it to my phone. So it's just a very comforting thing, and they're very affordable. They're not overpriced. I've put hundreds of trips out now with thousands of hours on these batteries, and they are performing flawlessly for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump to the AutoPilot, and let's see what results I get there. Okay, so now let's look at the AutoPilot 120 and its battery consumption. Just like with the Minn-Kota, I'm going to use my Rebel battery Bluetooth and the app that comes with that to allow me to monitor the use of the battery by this kayak and its motor. And we'll look at the relationship between speed and battery consumption. There's actually a 0 to 10 setting on the AutoPilot, so I'm going to go up by half increments and then call out the different speeds. So let's get started. Now, there's no wind, no current out here, but I've noticed that when spot locking, like if I'm spot locked in 2 miles per hour of current, it's drawing about the same amount as I would be if I was just moving at 2 miles per hour, maybe just a little bit more because the motor's compensating for location, but not dramatically more unless there's a lot of wind that's twirling you around. So it's a good approximation for spot locking in place in current too, if you know the speed of that current. Okay, so at a half setting, we're going at about 0.3 miles per hour, and we're drawing about 0.8 amps. Okay, at a speed setting of 1, we're drawing 1.2 amps and going 0.5 miles per hour, so a half mile per hour. At speed setting 1.5, we're going 0.8 miles per hour and drawing 1.8 amps. At speed setting 2, we are drawing 2.3 amps and going 1.1 mile per hour. Okay, at 2.5, we're going 1.3 miles per hour, 1.3 to 1.4, and drawing 2.9 amps. At speed setting 3, which I think is probably the most common one I use for most of my trolling applications, we're going 1.6 miles per hour and drawing 3.9 amps. At speed setting 3.5, we are going 1.9 miles per hour and drawing 4.8 amps. At speed setting 4, we are at 2 miles per hour and drawing 6 amps. At speed setting 4.5, we're at 2.4 miles per hour, drawing 7.4 amps. At speed setting 5, we're drawing 9 amps and going 2.6 miles per hour. At speed setting 5.5, we're going 2.7 miles per hour and drawing 10.5 amps. At speed setting 6, we're going 2.8 miles per hour, drawing 12.5 amps. At speed setting 6.5, now we're really starting to crank up here. We're drawing 14.9 amps and going 3.1 miles per hour. At speed setting 7, we're going 3.2 and drawing 17 amps. At speed setting 7.5, we're at 19.5 amps, going 3.5 miles per hour. Speed setting 8, we're at 21.8 amps and going 3.6 miles per hour. 8.5, we're at 24.9 amps, so almost 25 amps, going 3.6 miles per hour. Speed setting 9, 27.5 amps, going 3.8 miles per hour. Speed setting 9.5, we are drawing 30 amps and we're going 3.9 miles per hour. And then this is top speed at 10. We're drawing 35 amps, and we're going 4.1 miles per hour. So this is actually shows the efficiency of a longer boat over a shorter boat. The Minn-Kota 106 is a 10.5 foot kayak, and it's drawing 40 amps at its top speed. This one's only drawing 35 amps, and they're similar speeds. All right, so let's go and do some math now. Okay, as I did with the Minn-Kota 106, for the AutoPilot 120 here, I have the x-axis and speed miles per hour, and then on the y-axis I have the draw in amps. And obviously as your speed goes up, the draw off the battery goes up. But the main thing I wanted to take away from this is it's right around like 2.7, 2.8 miles per hour is that sort of inflection point where the efficiency really starts to drop off. You have to start using a lot more battery to gain speed. It gets especially true right above 3.5 miles per hour. You really start pushing up the draw off the battery, and it's going to deplete it much more quickly. And here I just want to reiterate, if you didn't watch the first part of the video where I was talking about the Minn-Kota 106, is that the two different battery types, steel lead acid versus lithium iron phosphate, have very different performances in terms of voltage and their relationship to volts and depth of discharge. So make sure you go back and watch that part if you didn't watch that to help understand the comparisons I'm going to make next in the potential range of this kayak using different battery types. Okay, so here I have again this whole idea of idealized potential range, and that is on the x-axis I got speed in miles per hour. That is, if you were to maintain that speed until the battery was depleted, what is your potential range in miles there on the y-axis? And this is very interesting compared to the Minn-Kota 106, which sort of just showed a predictable decline from the slowest speeds all the way down to the fastest speeds, whereas it looks like with the AutoPilot 120, it actually has an optimal speed between 1 and 1.5 miles per hour. And for someone like me who spends most of his time trolling at that speed, this is great news. And this just might just be an effect of the design of the motor, but it seems to run better at those speeds around 1 to 1.5 miles per hour than it does at slower speeds. And then you can see as you start getting down towards 2 and 2.5 miles per hour, the efficiency really starts to drop off in terms of your potential range. So if you look at the top speeds there, it doesn't matter what battery you have. You're not going to get much more than 8 to 12 miles out of it if you just cruise around at top speed. And even at fairly moderate speeds of 3 to 3.5 miles per hour, your range is still under 20 miles for the lithium battery and 10 miles or less for the steel lead acid. And again, this is optimal conditions, no current, no wind, not a heavy load on the kayak, so no waves out on the water. Waves are really going to deplete the efficiency. So this is just under perfect conditions. But again, there's a good illustration here that between 1 and 2 miles per hour, you've got really generous range on both of these. With the lithium, you're going to be anywhere from 20 to 40 miles, and with the steel lead acid, you're probably going to get somewhere between 18 and 25 miles out of it at those slower speeds. And just like I did with the MK106, we're going to run through a little scenario here. That is a 4-mile run to your fishing spot, no current, light winds, 8 miles of fishing at 2 miles per hour, so you might be trolling. Or this might just be an average as you're working your way along the lakeshore fishing. And then you end up with a 1-mile run back to the ramp. And we're going to compare conservative motor usage versus aggressive motor usage. That is, when you're making these long runs to your fishing spots and back to the ramp, are you just going at about 3 miles per hour, or are you really pushing it up to its top speed? And as you can see with conservative motor usage, you're going to burn about 18.5 amps just getting to your fishing spot in the morning. And then fishing at 8 miles of fishing at 2 miles per hour, you're going to burn about 24 amps. And then that short 3 mile per hour run back to the ramp, it's going to burn another 4.5 amps. You're going to end up with about 47 amps discharged off of the battery. This is, of course, under ideal conditions.
So whether or not you're running lithium or steel lead acid, you're going to be all right on a single charge for that day. Whereas with aggressive motor usage, you've got 34 amps burned on that first run in the morning at top speed. Again, just 24 amps doing your fishing, and then 8.3 amps on that 1 mile run back. So you're going to end up discharging around 66 amps off the battery. If you have steel lead acid, you're definitely well below the 12 volt threshold. Your motor's not going to be performing at optimally. You probably will still have some propulsion, but it ain't going to be great. And you're probably going to be wishing that you had a lithium battery at that time, because the lithium battery is going to be all right with 66 amps burned off of it. You probably won't even see much drop in voltage even at 66 amps. So goes to show, it really depends on how you use your motor and what battery you have in terms of your ability to spend long days on the water in these motorized kayaks. I'll put links in the description to Rebel batteries. I highly recommend checking them out. They're just so great. They're affordable. It's very nice to have that Bluetooth monitoring, to have that comfort of knowing how many amps you have remaining and what your behavior is having in terms of impact on the battery. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. Questions, concerns, criticisms, I would love to hear your thoughts on this video and if it helped you. Otherwise, just get out in the water, be safe, make sure you have your paddle, and get the best battery that you can afford so that you don't end up paddling back to shore. All right, see you guys next time.